Okay, now we're doing a recording of the very first page in the initiation text. We're just going to be reading the introduction from Franz Bardon from Initiation into Hermetics. Let's get started. Anyone who should believe to find in this work nothing else but a collection of recipes, with the aid of which he can easily and without any effort attain to honor and glory, riches and power, and aim at the annihilation of his enemies, might be told from the very inception that he'll put aside this book being very, very disappointed. So essentially what Bardon's doing when he says this statement is he's trying to separate a few types of people from reading this book. The first type of person he's trying to separate are people who are opportunistically going into this work for selfish reasons. The Hermetic stream is all about evolution, and evolution is about how do you develop skills that are going to support the group consciousness. By default, if you're just looking at having riches and having wealth and annihilating your enemies, those are all very, very self-oriented objectives. In contrast, the objective of a Hermeticist is all about service and personal ascension. And that has to do with how you raise the entire group consciousness to the next level, and whatever your skill sets are, whether that be in magic, that be in medicine, science, technology. And another distinction to make in this line that he says is he talks about producing recipes. This is not a recipe book. It is a framework that allows you to create whatever type of initiation path you want. Initiation in Hermetics is not about a spell book where you read the spells, you light the candles, and you say, so mote it be 3 times in a row. It's much, much more deep than that. And it's about having a pragmatic, realist relation to the world and to magic versus an idealized version. A magician who's an idealist going into this work may have more selfish reasons, and they may have conceptions of magic that just aren't true or grounded. A pragmatist and a realist, however, who comes into this work is going to find an intellectual framework that has a very, very strong basis in reality and has very lawful analogies that will make sense to him because of his maturity. All right, next paragraph. Numerous sects and religions do not understand the expression of magic, otherwise than black art, witchcraft, or conspiracy with evil powers. It is therefore not astonishing that many people are frightened by a certain horror whenever the word magic is pronounced. Jugglers, conjurers, and charlatans have discredited this term, and, considering this circumstance, there is no surprise that magic knowledge has always been looked down upon with a slight disregard. With Hermetics and any type of magical thinking, occult work, spiritual work, there's always going to be a stigma, and especially with this type of work because of some of the things that it entails and what it also promises to its users. Imagine you were in a tribe of 150 people 3,000 years ago. In that tribe, it was extremely tight-knit, you knew everybody, and if you can imagine if someone had more resources, more skills, more abilities, and they didn't share it with their group to help the bottom line, they would be very quickly ostracized. You see this in indigenous religious communities even to this day, where people who are magicians, shamans, are ostracized from the group because they don't get it. Now, this could be because they have schizophrenia, mental health disorders, and other challenges that couldn't be addressed in a tribal society. However, if you read between the lines, even if they were completely sane, they're still interacting with the spiritual world, and they're still interacting with emotions, ideas, things, planes of existence that the other people in the tribe cannot relate to. So the group consciousness couldn't be a support of it then, and it especially can't be a support of that now. And of course, there are tribal communities where magic is completely intertwined with the survivability of the group. One of the major factors that decided whether magic was accessible to your group or tribe growing up back in the day had to do with if it was applicable to your survival. If you needed to be able to talk to spirits to find the right herbs, remedies, medicines to help heal your sick and wounded, then it was an essential skill. And because it was an essential skill, it gets activated in your evolutionary biology. It gets activated in your DNA. Think of all the strange and odd behaviors that animals have, such as the migrations of the monarch butterflies, or the eel coming from the ocean, laying their eggs in the rivers and going back into the ocean again, and the opposite for the salmon. How do animals instinctively go in and find these things that are completely incoherent to us. The fact of the matter is that there are all these tuning forks and resonances that have to do with the exact way that these animals could survive, and thus they adapted to the circumstances. The same can be said about magic, where whatever we need as a group, as a culture, that is what we get and what we adapt to. This is why if you're in some Southeast Asian cultures or South Asian cultures, you may notice that a larger amount of the population has sensitivity to spirits and other worlds and other layers of reality, because it was directly necessary for their own survival. And this is also true in some developing countries and developing communities to this day. In the West, we really don't have much need for these as a baseline survival skill, because we have an abundance of resources. We have an abundance of information. We don't need to sear or look over a magic mirror in order to find information that's imperative to our survival. So from a completely survival sense, magic is a luxury that we get to utilize to have the peak level of life experiences we want, to have the most human, wonderful life we can possibly have. So in the West, we get to use magic for lifestyle maximization, living the best life, attracting the best friends, and having the best life you possibly can in your circumstances. And magic can help you come past your circumstances and ascend to different levels of consciousness perception that'll open up new doors and new opportunities you would have never known were available to you. Because it's all about finding those tuning forks, not for your survival, but for your maximization of your life. Let's move on. Even in the remotest times, the magus has been regarded as one of the highest adepts, and it might be of interest to learn that, as a matter of fact, the word magic is derived from this word. The so-called sorcerers are by no means initiates, but only imitators to the mysteries, who, counting partly on the ignorance and partly on the credulity of the individuality or a whole nation, in order to reach your selfish aims by lies and fraud. The true magician will always despise such practices. So this particular paragraph was very, very layered, and part of it had to do with the times and circumstances that Bardon was in. Bardon lived during communist Prague, and he also lived during the Holocaust, where he was actually in a concentration camp for 3.5 years, and he survived. Now, I don't know what concentration camp he was, but no matter what, that is an incredibly difficult thing to live through. And it's part of why Franz Bardon is so influential today, is his resilience. So being that he lived through World War I and World War II, and the Nazi Germany was practicing many occult practices, and to what extent did he have knowledge of that, I don't know. But Franz Bardon was in a lot of fraternal magic societies and lodges where he may have gotten insider information, and allegedly he also was contacted by the Third Reich for helping them in their regime. And allegedly, that's also why he was sent to a concentration camp, because he refused to work with them. Of course, I can't verify this knowledge personally, but perhaps if you know German or Czech, you can go to the Czech Republic and see if they have any records or files, or check in with the Bardon circle that exists in Prague. One other thing that this paragraph may point to is the distinction between people who are initiates versus people who are sorcerers, people who read a spell book and they are playing stuff out and they're trying to figure things out. Now, I don't think he's referring to just any old sorcerers. I think he's mostly referring to people who are using it to take advantage of other people's free will and their sovereignty as individuals, such as was the case in Nazi Germany with their occult uses. Unfortunately, there's more misinformation about magic than virtually any other subject on the planet, because it is as diverse as life itself in its application, its uses, and in fact, it's more diverse than the objective reality we know to ourselves, because of all the different layers that it also intersections with, because it virtually interfaces with infinite layers of reality, infinite planes of existence. And it also is incredibly nuanced and takes someone to initiate you for you to really comprehend and understand how energy works, how the system works, and how all these pieces come together. Let's move on to the next paragraph. In reality, magic is a sacred science. It is, in the very true sense, the sum of all knowledge, because it teaches how to know and to utilize the sovereign rules. There is no difference between magic and mystic or any other conception of the name. Wherever authentic initiation is at stake, one has to proceed on the same basis, according to the same rules, irrespective of the name given by this or that creed. Thus, he's just talking about the universality of a true initiation process, where there are certain steps, certain procedures that are always there, such as certain attunements, certain resonancies, connection with the sun sphere, and so forth. Considering the universal polarity rules of good and evil, active and passive, light and shadow, each science can serve good as well as bad purposes. Let us take the example of a knife, an object that virtually ought to be used for cutting bread only, which, however, can become a dangerous weapon in the hands of a murderer. It all depends on the character of the individual. This principle goes just as well for all the spheres of the occult sciences. In my book, I have chosen the term of magician for all my disciples, it being a symbol of the deepest initiation and the highest wisdom. So when Bardon's talking about how magic is a sacred science because it's the sum of all knowledge, you'll get to that understanding more when you practice invocation or evocation. Because everything in the universe is a resonance, an energy, a frequency, a bandwidth that you can connect with. By having the skills that Hermeticists have of mental transference and Akasha, you can open up gateways to any single frequency you could possibly conceive of, and more. And by teaching you the pragmatist principles of reality that are grounded in the way the universe functions and the way that energy functions, you are then able to utilize the energy for whatever intended purposes you wish. And of course, because of the objective of magic and the objective of any of the beings you'll work with in the future is all about your path of service and how you, in this incarnation, are going to help evolve human consciousness. Those frequencies that you'll cultivate and the frequencies you'll have a propensity to cultivate and the ones you already have peak ability in and will improve upon further are already going to be there for you. And by the time you're connected with non-dual light, they're going to be glowing. And when things glow with non-dual light, that's when you know that it's for you to do in that very moment. We'll cover those terms like non-dual light, Akasha, all those beings in later. One important piece I'd like to point out is when Bardon says the following. In my book, I have chosen the term of magician for all of my disciples, it being a symbol of the deepest initiation and the highest wisdom. Now, with the Hermetic framework, if you tune yourself to the very highest potential of yourself, that's could be your best bet for ascension, it's could be your best bet for service. So when Bardon says he specifically points out the term of magician, he's referring to this. And he's wanting to refer you so that you're in tune with your absolute best. However, that's not how you need to approach this initiation text. You need to approach it in whatever ways and path with your path of service. Now you may be thinking, oh, Jake, don't tell me what to do. I'm going to do it how the book says, because it says it right there, and it says to take it in these steps. The reason I say this is that once you read the Hermetics framework and you do a comparative analysis between this framework and other frameworks, even though this framework is incredibly complete and is super principled and gives you the meat and potatoes, the muscle and bones of how to go through about this initiation process, the initiation process itself is completely individualized to you as a person, and it cannot be replicated for any one person the same way. It's always going to be different for every single person to go through the process. The Buddhist once said that he had 80,000 different methods that he would teach his 80,000 different students for them to reach attainment. The same principle applies here because we're working with something that's not linear, it's not a step 1 to 10 process. This is the entirety of your life. This is the entirety of your existence, your experience, perceptions, and how you interface with reality. Because the initiation framework is a framework, but it's not a 2D mind map. It is a 3-dimensional holographic model through which things pull and glow, and things make it bigger in your life, things make it smaller, and it's interfacing with every single thing in your life all the time in the present moment. That's what makes this framework so significant and so powerful if you get the initiation, if you get the attunements right, and if you are in tune with the highest version of yourself. So in other words, I'd like you to choose your own initiation label. You don't have to be a magician, You can be a healer, you can be a doctor, you can be a scientist, you can be a carpenter. It really doesn't matter. It all has to do with your path of service or your path of ascension. If you're a Christian, a Buddhist, a Muslim, you're going to have a different label for this word as well. Maybe as a Christian, your goal is to attain Christ consciousness, and that is going to completely shift and rework the framework versus trying to become a Buddhist, Bodhisattva, or gain enlightenment. While the first 5 steps are going to be virtually the same for those goals, once you get past that, it's going to be individuated even further. But the motive, the energy, the drive that's going to get you to your destination and to your goal, and that's going to define your journey and give you all the options and open the doors, that's going to be this label that you set for yourself. So in your journal, as you're going through this process, label yourself. Like, I am a magician. I am a bodhisattva. I am attaining nirvana in this lifetime. I am attaining Christ consciousness. I am becoming one with Allah. Whatever that is for you. And just trust with whatever label you pick for yourself is going to be perfect for your needs. Because it's your label, it's your word. And remember, you could always change that word. You can always change, because this is a flexible path that adapts to your needs, it adapts to your goals. So there's no one right way to do it. Let's continue with the next paragraph. Many of the readers will know, of course, that the word tarot does not mean a game of cards, serving magical purposes, but a symbolic book of initiation, which contains the greatest secrets in a symbolic form. The first tablet of this book introduces the magician, representing him as a master of the elements and offering the key to the first arcanum, the secret of the ineffable name of the Tetragrammaton, the Kabbalistic Yod-He-Vav-He. Here we will, therefore, find the gate to the magician's initiation. The reader will easily realize how significant and how manifold the application of this tablet is. Not one of the books published up to date does describe the true sense of the first tarot card so distinctly as I have done in my book. It is, let it be noted, born from the own practice and destined for the practical use of a lot of other people. And all of my disciples have found it to be the best and most serviceable system. So Bardon's basically mentioning that the keys to the initiation process are found within the 4 elements. The 4 elements are a Platonic idea that got grounds back in ancient Greece, and perhaps even before that. I'm sure a historian or Gnostic would know even more than me, because in fact the 4 elements have been found in so many different systems throughout the world, including the Tattvas in India. Their influence extends to every corner of the world virtually. When we're talking about the Tetragrammaton, we're also talking about the quadrupolar magnet. As will be revealed later in the book, we will learn how to establish the quadrupolar magnet so that you have the elements in the right corners of the room when you're doing a practice. And by establishing these elements, you can get 4 different layers and degrees of separation of mind. In addition, you can have different energies that stabilize your mind so that you can have full and complete equilibrium whilst you're going about any of your practices. This equilibrium will be a necessity when doing any type of higher ritual work or trying to attain higher states of mind, whether that be light bodies, samadhi, etc. Thank you so much for coming along this video. If you want to see more of me and more of this content, you can check out my channel on YouTube at Mystery College. And you also can see my website at mysterycollege.com, where I have courses, articles, and am in the production of several books to help you in your initiation. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video.